Humagyantimirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate girim yat kripatamam vande Sri Gurudina Karanam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna, thank you so much for joining. So we had completed the discussion on the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita last week, nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. And we'll leave some time at the beginning of the class for any discussion, question answers on the chapter. And following that, we'll do a breakout on the 14th chapter. So just to do a quick recap on the 13th chapter, this is the first chapter in the third section of the Bhagavad Gita, which is classified as Gyan. Then it talks more about knowledge, and it begins with Arjun asking Krishna 6 questions. That what is the field of activities? What is the Kshetra? Who is the knower of the field? Who is the Kshetragya? Then what is Gyan? What is knowledge? What is Gya? What's the object of knowledge? Who is the enjoyer? Purusha. And who is the enjoyed? Or what are the modes of material nature? Prakriti. And Krishna systematically answers these questions over the chapter. He first gives a brief response, and then he expands upon it. That the Kshetra is the body of the living entity. That's the field of activity. The Kshetragya, the knower, is both the Jiva and the Paramatma. The Jiva knows its own body. The Paramatma knows all the bodies. Then what is knowledge? Gyan, understanding the difference between the two knowers, the soul and the super soul, and their relationship with the body. That is Gyan. Then what is Gya? What is the object of knowledge? The object of knowledge is understanding the soul and the super soul. Who is the enjoyer? Who is the Purusha? The Jiva is the enjoyer of its own Kshetra, of its own body. And the super soul is the enjoyer of everything. So they are both Purusha. The Jiva is the infinitesimal Purusha, and the Paramatma is the infinite Purusha. And what are the modes of material nature? So Krishna says that the modes of material nature are the cause of all material causes and effects. And this answer essentially is the platform on which the next chapter will be spoken. So this is a brief recap. So I'm going to stop over here and see if you have any questions or discussions on the 13th chapter.
Hare Krishna, Bhayahai Prabhu. This is Advaita Haridas. Dandavat Pranam Prabhu. One quick question. I just wanted to understand the relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Super Soul, basically Krishna and the Paramatma. We understand that Krishna has external energy and the internal energy, and that's how everything in the world exists. So how exactly Paramatma fits in this particular equation? Then he's definitely not an energy. Obviously, he's an expansion of Krishna. But how do we kind of understand that? I must say that since external energy of Krishna is also everywhere, and Paramatma is also everywhere, so how do we really kind of differentiate these two?
Thank you, Prabhu. So it's a good question. In one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada says that to understand the presence of the Paramatma in the material world, we can understand the presence of the deity in the material world. So just like an established deity is completely spiritual, but completely existing within the material world, the Paramatma is completely spiritual, but existing within the material world. There's some difference that the deity is dependent on the material elements for its existence. And as you mentioned, the Super Soul is Vishnu Tattva. He is an expansion of Krishna. So he is not dependent on the material world. In the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam, this is one of the characteristics that is given of the Lord, that and his expansions, that he's not dependent on anything, and everything is dependent on him. So what applies to Krishna applies to Paramatma also. That even though he appears to be within the material world, but he exists before its creation and after its destruction.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Narayan Rishi Prabhu.
Sorry, Prabhu, I forgot to rename the name. It's Chitra here. Probably is Purusham and Purusha same?
Okay. Can you repeat the question, Mataji?
Are Purusham and Purusha are the same thing?
Purusham and Purusha, yeah, they're the same. I think it's just different Sanskrit ways of conjugating the nouns, but they're the same.
Thank you.
Essentially, the root word Purush means one who enjoys. And that's why it is applied to both the Jiva and the Lord. The scope of the enjoyment is a little different, that the Jiva is enjoying only within its own kshetra, within its own body. And the Lord has, of course, the entire creation to enjoy. But because the Jiva is qualitatively the same as the Lord, so the propensity to enjoy is the same, right? So sometimes we get a little confused that Purusha means men, those in a man's body. That's not really true, because the Jiva can be a man in one birth, a woman in another birth. So it's not that enjoying propensity is only when the soul is in a man's body. It's the intrinsic nature of the soul to enjoy. That's why the soul is called Purusha, one who enjoys. Okay, Bhakti Vinod Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So on the qualities, Krishna mentions amanitvam, adambhitvam. So the difference between the two, is it like humility is like you have no expectation of respect, but adambhitvam is basically even though you don't have that quality, you are showing off. Is that the difference, or what is the difference between the two?
So, what's the English translation of that quality, Prabhu? The second one.
Pridelessness.
Okay, so you're talking about the difference between humility and pridelessness.
Yes, Prabhu.
So, so amanvitvam. So if you look at the word, it's a negation. So means that not, and manvityam means desiring respect. Right. So the reason it is presented as the root quality is because it is considered to be the gateway to entering into devotion and basically getting access to the other qualities. So when a person is manvitam, the person essentially is going away from his intrinsic nature. So the intrinsic nature of the soul is amanvitam. Right. So when he goes away from that intrinsic nature, he becomes manvitam. Now, so amanvitam is, so pridelessness is the absence of pride, right? And it's so maybe an analogy will help. So you can ask a person, you can ask a child that do not be naughty, right? So naughtiness is something that the child does, and then you say do not be naughty. So pride is a quality that people with certain conceptions cultivate. So you're saying do not cultivate that quality. Humility is that you revert to your basic quality. You already have that quality. You don't have to cultivate it. You already have that quality. But that's why I said amanvitam, that there is something that is covering it. So you have to just remove that, and then your intrinsic nature is revealed. So the qualities are close to one another, but amanvitam is considered to be more intrinsic to the soul. So that's why it's considered to be the fountainhead of all of the qualities.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Vajranath Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji. So this is related to the text 16. This text 16 translation says that the supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, the moving and non-moving. So what does non-moving means? I know the trees and what else?
It means that also, Prabhupada explains that the super soul is present everywhere. Generally, we consider the super soul to be present in the heart of a living entity. The Prabhupada says that he is present within every atom, whether the atom belongs to a human being or a stone or a tree. So the super soul is present there. Because if you look at it, and this is a slightly more scientific explanation, that we have discovered so many properties of material, different matter, that iron behaves in such a way, copper behaves in such a way, an atom behaves in such a way, the electrons behave in such a way. Now, what is causing them to behave in that way? There has to be somebody that is causing, because matter by nature, it does not know I need to behave that way. Prabhupada would say that there are so many laws. There is the law of motion, there is the law of electricity. When there are so many laws, somebody has to be giving those laws. The laws cannot come on their own. So it's the Paramatma that is permeating every atom of the creation, making sure that they are all behaving as expected. Right? one of the lectures I was hearing, the Prabhu was, he was more of a scientific inclination. And he was saying that the gravitational constant of the universe, if it varies by 10 to the power of minus 16, so you put 16 zeros after the decimal, if the gravitational constant changes by that, the universe will collapse. Now, who is maintaining that gravitational constant to so much of accuracy? It's a Paramatma that is maintaining. So that's how the understanding is that between moving and non-moving, one level, as you said, it points to the charachar, that the plants are non-moving and animals and humans are moving. It also points to the fact that the Paramatma is permeating the jad, that basically is not capable of moving.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Rajkumar Prabhu? Prabhu, you're on mute. You may want to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, this question might be naive, but I always get question when Krishna is talking about the super soul, he uses the pronoun he. It's like he's referring to somebody other than himself. Why so?
So it's a good question. He does not only use that in the context of the super soul, he will use it also in the context of Bhagwan, that he says that, you surrender unto him completely. Right? Sometimes he will say surrender unto me, sometimes he will say surrender unto him. There is no clear understanding. Bhagavad Gita, there are a couple of explanations. So this question has been asked, so I can share what the answer was given. There are a couple of explanations. One is that Bhagavad Gita is a song. So in songs, they are adorned with literary ornaments. Right? When somebody is singing, then it's not just prose. It's not just the person conveying information in words. The person is basically using literary embellishments to express. And we see that in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna sometimes addresses himself as Bhagwan, sometimes says he's surrender unto him. So it's a literary embellishment. Second reason is that sometimes Krishna will, out of humility, point to the personality of Godhead as a separate entity. This is more being cognizant of his external position there. So he's there standing on the chariot with Arjun. He's a prince in the Vrishni dynasty. So out of humility, sometimes he will address the personality of Godhead separately. We see the same humility when Krishna will say that what I am saying is based on what the sages of the past have said. So he's surrendering to the instruction of the sages. Now, he's the personality of Godhead. But out of humility, he's saying, or he will say that I'm speaking briefly here, but more details, you can get it in the scriptures. Right? So he's surrendering to the scriptures. So he's trying to establish their authority, that even he as the personality of Godhead refers to them. Also, he's establishing his taking a more humble position. And the third reason, as you mentioned, is that sometimes Krishna, he will make the distinction between him and his expansions. Because when he's standing in front of Arjun, he's Swayam Bhagwan. And sometimes he will make that distinction that he is the Paramatma, he is Vishnu. So he'll make that distinction. Now, having said that, if you take these three and apply it everywhere where you see Krishna is doing that, it will not be uniformly applied. And so that's why I said it's not a conclusive explanation, but this is the explanation that that I heard. So I'm sharing that with you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I'm going to start off the 14th chapter, give you a brief introduction. After that, break you into the groups, and then we'll convene back, and each group will present. So let me get the presentation going and share it. Okay. So the 13th chapter was a bit of a complex chapter. And as I mentioned, that it becomes simpler. 14th is one of the simpler chapters. 15th is even more simpler. 16th is even more simpler. So they become easier and easier. One reason is that the subject matter that's being spoken is something that we have personal experience, right? So when Krishna speaks about the spiritual world, we have to take his word for it. When he speaks about the material world, we can empirically validate what is being spoken, and that makes it a bit easier to relate to. So the 14th chapter talks about the three modes of material nature. And the interesting thing is that the modes of material nature is, there are more verses talking about the modes of material nature than about bhakti in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Even if you look at the middle 6 chapters, Krishna really starts speaking about bhakti from the 9th chapter onwards. And then 10th, he talks about his opulences. 11th, he talks about the universal form. 12th, he talks about bhakti again. So few verses, now that's not the only point he talks about bhakti. He does talk about it at other places. But in terms of the modes of material nature, their interaction, their effect, their influence, there are more verses in the Bhagavad Gita that talk about. In fact, that is the single most spoken topic. And the reason is that it is the single most prominent element in the lives of the conditioned souls. And as Krishna will say later on, that whatever is binding us, if you are able to untangle, then we can escape this cycle of samsara, right? So it's like there is a man that is tied to a pole, and you go to the man and you keep telling him that just down the road there is a wonderful place, and they have good food over there, and they have a nice resting place. So you can talk all that you want to the man, but as long as he's tied to the pole, that conversation, it may generate a desire in him to go there, but he won't be able to go there. So unless he unties himself, he will not be able to act on the whatever you're telling him. So that's what the modes of material nature do. They tie the jiva to the material world. So that's why Krishna speaks so much about it. So what is the connection with the 13th chapter? So if you remember, of the 6 questions that Arjun asked, the 6th question was specifically this, that what is Prakriti? And then Krishna replies that Prakriti is that which binds the jiva. So specifically, chapter 13, verse 22 is considered to be the seed verse of not only the 14th chapter, but actually of the rest of the Bhagavad Gita. So the verse is Purusha Prakriti Stohi Bhongte Prakriti Jan Gunan. Karanam gunasangasya sad asad yoni janmashu. Right? Purusha Prakriti, so that the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with the material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. So, this verse is essentially capturing the plight of the jiva in the material world. Not just one life, but life after life after life. That the jiva is trapped in this cycle of material existence because of karanam gunasangasya, because of his association with the material nature. And the result of it is sadasad yoni janmashu. So sadasad means sometimes he's a demigod, sometimes he's an animal. In different good and evil species, he will take birth. So the essence of what Krishna has presented to us so far is that there is the spirit soul, which is completely spiritual. When he comes into the material world, then he takes on a material body. And so there is the material body and there is the jiva within the material body. Krishna accompanies the jiva as the Paramatma. And the conditioned jiva purposefully embraces the material nature. And when he embraces the material nature, then she binds him with the modes of material nature. And as long as the jiva is in this embrace, bound by this material nature, he will only look at Krishna peripherally, either as an order supplier, or as a punisher, or as somebody to ignore. So, Krishna wants us to clearly understand this scenario, that this is what is happening right now. Now, obviously, he does not want us to leave. He does not want to leave us over there. But it's like if you go to Google Maps and try to get directions, first thing they ask is, where are you and where do you want to go? Right? So then source and destination, based on that, it will tell you the navigation. So Krishna is doing that. He's describing first where we are. There's a jiva embodied within a material body, Paramatma accompanying with him, embracing material nature, bound by the modes of material world, mostly ignoring Krishna. That's where we are, right? And the destination Krishna will continuously encourage us. He'll speak about the spiritual world. He'll speak about the difference between the material and spiritual world, right? And then he will establish the path to do that. So the 14th chapter is, for the most part, giving us the current lay of the land. So it's a small chapter. It has 27 verses in it. And as I mentioned, that all the chapters in the third section are small. The 12th chapter had only 20 verses. This chapter has, the 13th chapter had 35 verses. This chapter has 27 verses. The 15th chapter has 20 verses. So they're all small chapters, with the exception of 18, which has 78 verses. We'll divide it as follows in the 4 groups. The first 9 verses talks about the conditioning of the modes. The verses 10 to 18 talk about the consequences of the mode. The verses 19 to 27, and this actually is the real purpose, because Krishna, he wants us to go somewhere from where we are. So verse 19 to 27 is transcending the modes, and group 4 is more of overarching, that as practicing devotees, when we are sadhakas, we have a foot in both the boats, right? So we are subject to the modes, but we are also executing bhakti. So how best to use the modes to further our bhakti? Okay. Any questions about the breakout groups? Okay. If not, then I'm going to ask Chaitanya Ras Prabhu to help in the breakouts.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I've opened the groups.
Okay.
It's 15 minutes, Prabhu.
It's 15 minutes, and after that, if you can, one person can present for 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes after that.
Okay, Prabhu. So you just have to, for the devotees, you just have to, the screen appears and you just have to click on the group, or probably it says room 1, room 2, room 3, room 4. So you just have to hit join next to it. If you have trouble joining, let me know.
I think for some of us, it's coming in the left top corner as a joint breakout room. We can use that option as well.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Bhayahai Prabhu. I don't know. I was trying to join group 4. I'm not sure if I'm there or probably not.
I don't think, but let me see if I can. Room 4.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
I'm trying to join group 1, but I'm on the phone. I'm not sure how to join.
Which group are you in, Prabhu?
Group 1.
1. Okay.
I'm on the cell phone. So
Are we still missing some devotees? Okay, no, we got people are back.
Okay, welcome back. So we will start with group 1.
Hey, Krishna Prabhu. So our verses were 1 through 9. So here, Krishna in the verses 1 to 2 is glorifying the knowledge he's about to give. He says, again, he has done similar thing in chapter 7, 9, and 10. So he's giving that by this knowledge he's about to give, Arjun can attain perfection. He can attain the supreme perfection. And if he has this knowledge, then he will be freed from the cycle of birth and death. And then in verses 3 and 4, he's explaining about that how everything comes in this material world comes, the material substance is the source. The Brahman is the source of birth, and it is Krishna who is impregnating that. So, like Prabhupada gives an example, like Scorpio lays eggs in the rice, and people might think that rice is the source of the birth of the Scorpio, but it is the actual mother who laid the eggs, and the mother is the source. Similarly, in verse 4, Krishna said, he is the seed giving fathers. He says, Aham bija pratapita. So when Krishna impregnates, Krishna's Mahavishnu impregnates the Mahatattva or the Brahman, then the Jivas are entering this material world. And in verses 5 through 9, he's explaining how the material modes bind the pure Jiva. So in verse number 5, he explains that the 3 material modes of nature are the goodness, passion, ignorance, and they are binding, or they are conditioning the Jiva in this material world. And then he speaks about the mode of goodness, which is illuminating, it gives happiness. But again, nevertheless, it is conditioning the soul. It is covering the soul. Then the Rajoguna is characterized by the attraction between a man and a woman. And when this passion increases, then there's attachment to material things increases. So Rajoguna is basically saying the attachment for the attained and longing for the unattained. So it's characterized by the fruitive activities. And then lastly, the verse 8 says about Tamoguna. It's characterized by madness, laziness, and sleep. And Krishna then summarizes that in verse 9, that mode of goodness will lead us to happiness and illumination. Passion will lead us to fruitive activities, and the mode of ignorance covers our knowledge, and it binds us to madness.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very good. Nicely summarized. Okay, we'll do group 2 now.
Hi Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanvat Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada. So the section is from 10 to 18, Prabhuji. So from 10 to 13, it is the section is recognizing the prominence of the mode, and 14 to 18 is the effect of the conditioning by the modes. So recognizing the prominence of the mode, basically how the different modes take domination over the other. Some may be sometimes the mode of goodness can dominate the passion and ignorance, and vice versa. And it all depends upon the past karma. They get the operations and exertions is completely determined by the old karma, and the prominence, the certain mode is manifested in one's dealings and activities. So So when goodness increases, what happens is all the body parts are illuminated with knowledge and happiness. When the passion increases, the symptoms of greed, fruitive activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire and hankering develops. So, and when ignorance increases, darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion is manifested. So this is the prominence of the mode. And moving to the second section, which is effect of conditioning by the mode. There is two subsections, which is what happens when death happens with the different modes, and what is the result of action with the different modes. So the first, when somebody dies with mode of goodness, they have a chance of going to the higher planets of great sages like Brahmaloka, Janaloka, and they can have a very happy and contented life for many years. When they are dying with the mode of passion, they want to have a lot of fruitive activities, and they come back to the earthly planet to fulfill it. When they're dying with mode of ignorance, they are in very lower. They'll be born in the animal kingdom or in the lower species of life. And I'm coming to the last section. What is the result in the action of these three modes? When you are in mode of goodness, you become very purity. It is exhibited, and knowledge is automatically exhibited. And then you also rise up to the Brahmaloka. You can even become a Brahma, Lord Brahma. When the result of action and the passion is a lot of misery, because you are aspiring all the time, and misery, greed, and you will end up in the earthly planets. In the mode of ignorance, it is foolishness, madness. The result is you're always angry, mad, illusion, conditioned by illusion, and you are in the hellish planets, like the lower planets. That's my summary, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Very nice. Thank you so much. Group 3.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Our sections were 19 to 27, and this is about transcending the modes of nature. So in this, Krishna starts with saying that one who knows the modes, and he knows that Krishna is transcendental to these modes, will attain the spiritual nature. And then he also says the person who transcends the modes experience what it means to be liberated. And one who is free from modes, he enters into the devotional service realm. And then Arjuna asks, how do I identify a person who's transcended these material nature? It's almost like how Krishna asks, how does a Siddha Prajna behave? How does he talk, or how does he live, or what does he do? It's almost like a similar question Arjuna asked to Krishna. And for that, Krishna starts explaining how a person who has transcended modes of nature actually regards happiness and distress as the same, and sees everything equal, and he's steady, and he doesn't have the differentiation between a praise, blame, honor or dishonor. Everything he sees as equal or the same, and renounces all kinds of material activities. So that's how Krishna explains to Arjuna that this is how a person who has transcended modes of nature is. And then he also states that a person who has transcended who's in devotional service, transcends the modes of nature and comes to the platform of Brahman. So it is very interesting here that verse number 20 says, a person who transcends the modes of nature comes to devotional service. And here it says a person who is in devotional service transcends the modes of nature. So it's more like one supports the other. and other way around as well. So it's that's a very interesting point that we noted. And also at the end, Krishna says Brahman is immortal. Like the way he said is, the person who transcended the modes, he or who's in devotional service, comes to the stage of Brahman or realization of Brahman. So so Krishna continues saying that Brahman is immortal and it is the ultimate happiness. So that's what we discussed in the group 3. Prabhu.
Good. Thank you, Prabhu. And yeah, it's nice that you were able to distill that point. I'll speak more about it. The fact that bhakti emerges by transcending the modes, and bhakti is the cause of transcending the mode. So it almost looks like it's a circular dependency. And Prabhupada has explained, Acharyas have explained how to, because when there is circular, it is basically, it is self-perpetuating, how to get into it. So I'll speak more about it when we discuss. Very good, thank you. So moving on to group 4.
Hare Krishna. Sorry about the echo there. So for us, this was a very, it was an interesting kind of a topic without any particular reference to any verse. But there were 2 verses that basically caught our attention in terms of what the overall theme is. One, of course, is verse 26 from this chapter. But then we also kind of thought about chapter 2, verse 45, where Krishna says to Arjun that Traigunya Vishya Veda Nishtraigunya Bhavarjuna Nirdandva Nitya Sattvasto Niryogakshema Atman, meaning that the Vedas generally deal with the topics of the 3 modes, but you should try to transcend those 3 modes and be situated above the modes. And then using that as a launching point, we jump to verse 26 here and thought that this verse kind of explained in the purport very nicely. Prabhupada explains that by understanding the modes that are binding us, we can then understand how to unbind ourselves from these 3 modes. And that when we are unbound, it leads to a state of equanimity. And equanimity implying that we are indifferent to the dualities of this material world, which are a natural consequence of being in the material world, being in this material body, which is subject to these dualities. But a person, through the practice of bhakti, reaches a point where they are indifferent to these dualities, and hence they are situated, in equanimity. So, and the word avyabhicharena, that was in verse 26, that basically implies the tendency to render service to Krishna exclusively. So at the end of the day, and I'll cut this short, but at the end of the day, we thought that by engaging in bhakti focused strictly on Krishna, we are able to understand what is keeping us away from him. And when we understand what's keeping us away or who is the enemy, then we can target it or train our minds to kind of, through the practice of bhakti, through sadhana, to stay away from those traps or those pitfalls and advance further in bhakti.
Excellent, Prabhu. So I think to summarize what you're saying is that if we know our nature, we will know our strengths and weaknesses, and we stay away from the weakness and we leverage our strength.
Right.
Right. So modes, and we'll talk about this more, modes in themselves are not bad. It's how you use them. That's what, like sleeping. Sleeping is the mode of ignorance. But you have to sleep. If you don't sleep, you can't get up for Mangalarti. So,
sure.
So it's using the modes. So it's a difficult topic. Time was less, and you caught all the main points. The group caught all the main points. So thank you very much for it.
Thank you.
So thank you. What we'll do is next week we'll begin with my explanation of summarizing the explanation that's been given so nicely by the groups for the 14th chapter, and after that we will break for any discussion or question answers. So next week we should finish the 14th chapter completely. Okay, so we'll end over here. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanande. Hari.